So here we are, the Eternals, and it was bad in a very baffling way. But before I start talking about the plot, there are some things I'd like to get out of the way first. I don't think the Eternals was the worst MCU Phase War thing. I would give this title to other stuff we've seen before instead. But considering how bad Phase 4 has been so far, I hardly consider the Eternals a win. I also know that a lot of people who were expecting this movie to be terrible were surprised to see that the movie turned out to be not that horrible, or even for thinking that it was good and for really liking it. I don't want to hate the Eternals just for the sake of trashing on Marvel Phase 4, but this movie had problems and dumb stuff in it. Hence why I think the Eternals is still a very bad movie, and I hope to explain my honest reasons why throughout this video. So with that being said, let's talk about it. So the movie begins with some credits explaining how the Eternals came to be. They are sent to Mesopotamia in the year 5000 BC to save people from some monsters, the so-called deviants. Right after that, we are in present time in London and we see Cersei living her life like an ordinary human. She has a job and a boyfriend, and honestly, so far so good. The problems with this movie start showing up, however, when Cersei and her boyfriend Dane have a talk about the Eternals when the two of them, along with Sprite, are found by a deviant and Ikarus shows up and defeats it. During the talk, Dane asks some very reasonable questions like, why didn't they stop Thanos or any other terrible conflict or war for the past 7,000 years the Eternals have spent on Earth? To which Cersei says,
we were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
Why?
And also because if they were to interfere, this would have happened.
Why? If we'd protected humanity from everything for 7,000 years, you'd never have had the chance to develop in the way you were meant to.
This excuse gets even worse when the statement is barefacedly contradicted in the most pathetic way possible. Because not long after that explanation is given by Cersei, we are shown Phastos, one of the Eternals now in Babylon, in the year 575 before Christ, creating a freaking steam engine to help humans work faster.
The plot thickens.
Then he makes a plow, advised by Cersei to use it to help some new settlers. And also Cersei herself helping them by creating a stream of water with her powers for their crops. How come are those three examples, one of them being a steam engine intended to be presented to the Babylonian civilization almost 2,000 years before the steam engine was actually invented, not supposed to mess up with human development, but interfere in wars to save victims disrupt how humanity is meant to grow? One could argue that Ajax prevented Phastos from giving them his steam engine because she said, "No, Phastos, it's too soon." Although this line sounds more like Phastos needing to wait before presenting his steam engine once humanity is ready for such invention than Ajax meaning that humans must develop for themselves without their Eternals' help, to be honest. But still, he makes a plow, which is far simpler than an engine, of course, but still, the plow was still a revolutionary tool for harvesting crops despite its simplicity. The fact that Cersei talked about Phastos' plow being useful for the new settlers in a civilization that existed about 2,500 years ago is still within the realm of possibility in terms of interfering in human development. Same with Cersei creating a stream of water with her powers. Instead of the people using their intelligence, experience, and current technology to come up with a way to find the closest source of water and bring it to their crops, thus developing on their own, water is brought to them by Cersei's powers as an Eternal instead. Again, how come are those examples not supposed to interfere in the way humanity was supposed to develop, when preserving the way mankind was supposed to develop was a determinant reason why they never interfered in wars to save innocents to begin with? But don't worry, it gets worse. Dane comes up with yet another reasonable question. If the deviants were thought to be dead for the past 500 years, then why were the Eternals still there? And Cersei says that they've been waiting to be told that they can go home. Humanity is tormented by war, conflicts, one purple guy killing off billions with his nap, and not only they were instructed not to interfere, but also while all this happened for the past 500 years, they were just waiting to be told to go back home.
The plot thickens.
Here's the thing about the Eternals. When you already had a story about characters we liked and the story's already concluded, and suddenly we start having those other new characters who are advertised as very, very strong, only to be also told that not only they were absent from that past 10 years Marvel took to develop its main storyline, but also from the past 500 years altogether, one can logically wonder why such powerful characters were never there to help, and what their reasons to remain idle for all this time are, if they really are the good guys they claim to be. And when your answer for why those powerful characters were never there for the past 500 years is because this movie's version of the Timekeepers commanded them not to interfere as humanity faced great threats and to wait to be told to go back home, only for this premise to be contradicted anyway, the people making this movie can't really blame us for not being into that story when the best they could do to justify their absence is by making them abide to orders given by some aloof figures from above, even if it means doing nothing in some of the most drastic situations ever, like half of the global population getting killed by one person snap. I'm not against the introduction of new characters in the MCU just because its previous phase is already concluded, but still, having yet another movie about unknown characters up until that moment after having one decade with far more charismatic characters, only for those unknown characters to be presented as far more powerful than anything we had seen before, whose story is also relevant while also never showing up for half a millennia, whereas the other heroes will likely were putting themselves in great danger in order to save humanity, it feels incredibly obnoxious and overall really crappy writing to try to justify why they did nothing because they were told to, when actually the excuse this movie gave us about their absence makes everything worse. Maybe this dialogue between Dane and Cersei could have been a great opportunity to show her talking about how the Eternals were sad with the death of innocents, especially when Thanos did the snap, and how they wanted to do something to help out of compassion for the victims, and how being forced to do nothing as innocents died devastated them as means to make the Eternals more charismatic, and also to try to make their absence during those 500 years less stupid, but the conversation just had to be about Cersei and her ex-boyfriend Ikarus instead. So during the Babylon segment, there it is, Marvel's very first sex scene. Because Tony Stark doing it in Iron Man 1 over 10 years ago doesn't exist anymore, I guess. I also can't help myself but feel that not only I couldn't care less about Ikarus and Cersei's romance so far in this flashback segment, but also that I think they went way too fast from their romance being settled when Ikarus and Ajax talk about his feelings for Cersei to the two of them having sex not long after that. I know we see a bit of development, he tries to speak their language, he tries to work with them, he's watching her, but I think they went from that to the actual sex like way too fast. And also the way their characters interacted from the very beginning of the film up to that moment didn't really work. Their first interaction was so meh, I could have never guessed that these two would have a romance, had not been the posters talking about their sex scene being the first MCU sex scene, to be honest. I think this movie failed to settle them as a legit couple, let alone showing them having sex right after that. But maybe it's just me, I don't know. Back to present day, they find Ajax in America, but she was killed by a deviant. This is really aging like milk. So an aura comes out of Ajax's body and enters into Cersei's body, allowing her to see and talk to Arishem. So we have yet another flashback scene, this time in 1521 AC. There's a massacre going on, buildings are being set on fire, people were getting slaughtered, and deviants were involved. When Makkari and Angelina Jolie's characters reunited with the others, Faso says, "I'm sure it was a lot of fun for you." And Angelina Jolie's character says it was. There were people getting killed everywhere back there. Makkari actually saved a little kid from being crushed by a huge pillar, and Thena says it was fun because they've got to kill tons of deviants? What amazing characters you gave us, Marvel Phase 4. Thanks, I hate it. The Eternals see more attackers slaughtering innocents. Drug wants to use his powers to make the bloodshed stop, and he was right. If you are someone who wants to help others and you see the slaughter of innocents, one can logically think about using one's own powers to make it stop. But Ajax stops him because they don't interfere in human wars, but Drug says that it was not a war, but a genocide. Drug talks with disdain to Phastos because Phastos' help in humanity advance led to a huge efficiency in their weapons, leading to that massacre the Eternals were witnessing in 1521. So Phastos helping mankind advance interfered with some civilization's development the moment Drew connects Phastos' help to that massacre in a cause and effect correlation, which can affect mankind as a whole as those civilizations helped by Phastos interact with other civilizations, especially if they interact in a violent way. So what Phastos did does indeed affect humanity, and the way it develops throughout the centuries. There's also another example of Phastos' help affecting humanity when he's shown crying in Japan. So again, how come is that not interfering the way humanity is meant to develop, as Cersei explained to Dane at the beginning of the film, but the Eternals interfering to save innocents messes everything up? Remember, Drug is explicitly told not to interfere by Ajax because the Eternals don't interfere in their wars, but helping mankind advance to the point of creating advanced lethal weapons which lead to wars doesn't interfere with how human development is meant to happen? Drew storms out about not being able to help everyone for all those 7,000 years, and he starts asking if their mission was worth it. And he was right once again. So Drug makes the bloodshed stop, and Ajax tells the remaining Eternals that they're afraid to go, given that there are no more deviants. Ikarus then raises a reasonable concern that Ajax should speak to Arishem first before making such call to let them split up. And Ajax, in a very dumb way, tells Ikarus to mind his own business, in other words.
I didn't ask you for your advice, Ikarus. Do not forget your place.
Back to present time again, we see the Eternal dude who shoots lasers through his fingers in this cringe moment, which reminded me of that dance at the end of the live-action remake of Aladdin a lot. I was both amused and cringing, and also Ikarus' reaction here is priceless. So this Eternal was struggling between leaving his movie production behind or saving mankind from the monsters they fought for thousands of years, which is so lame. Both needs are not even comparable to choose to stop the deviants or continue to make your movie. Now they're on their way to find the other Eternals. They try to find Gilgamesh and Thena. Gilgamesh learns about Ajax's death and he is devastated. I understand his character's feelings, but I think Ajax was such a mediocre character, so if Chloe Zhao wanted me to feel something when Gilgamesh mourns her death, then I completely failed to. So Cersei manages to speak with Arishem, and Arishem reveals the real purpose of their mission on Earth. Basically, Earth has been chosen to become a celestial home planet, meaning that a new celestial will be born out of planet Earth. The name of such event is the Emergence. So basically, planet Earth and every single person who lives on it will die, so a new celestial can be born. But it is necessary because then new forms of life can be created across the universe and the cycle can be kept, thanks to the celestials. And the Eternals were actually some kind of robots or whatever because they were created and programmed by Arishem, how to make that happen during their missions. Because if there are no more Celestials, then all life will die. So it turns out that the Deviants were also created by Arishem with the same purpose as the Eternals. However, something wrong happened, which made the Deviants the way they currently are, and that's why the Eternals must destroy them. Given that now the conflict of this movie is basically settled, to stop the birth of a Celestial and save Earth, disobeying the orders given by Arishem, then needless to say that Arishem failed twice at creating entities who had one job. Arishem, this basically godlike figure or whatever, created and programmed the Eternals, and yet the possibility of the Eternals using their free will to the point of completely choosing to go against Arishem's goal and completely preventing his plan to succeed by stopping the Emergence is a thing that can happen?
Dude, fucking hell.
Also, now that it's revealed that to get enough life force to make the birth of a Celestial happen is fundamentally connected to the number of humans, hence why the Deviants who were killing humans needed to be destroyed, the Eternals' orders not to interfere in wars simply make no sense. Take a look at the number of deaths in both world wars we had, the genocide for the past 7,000 years, and most of all, Thanos' inept settling killing of billions. All those conflicts that led to massive death numbers were preventing the Emergence from happening. So why couldn't the Eternals interfere if Arishem needed to harvest humans like cattle for the Celestial to be able to be born? Especially when some of the Eternals' interferences, like Phastos advancing humans to the point of devising lethal weapons, as it's shown in Drew confronting him for that in 1521 AD, and in that other flashback scene in 1945, the atomic bomb ended up resulting in more deaths. Those are clear examples of not only the Eternals contradicting the not interfering the way humanity was meant to develop role explained by Cersei at the beginning of the film, but also the Eternals hampering their creator's ultimate goal.
I thought we were heroes. Turns out we are the bad guys.
Considering their absence as genocide and wars happened, not to mention killing worlds for the Celestials to be born, this is perhaps the most honest line in this whole movie.
We have no right to stop the birth of a Celestial.
And so, the people of Earth have no right to die in Armageddon just because they happen to have enough bad luck to the point of either getting killed by a snap or live in a world with billions suddenly dead, only to get their lives back just in time to die again in this event that happens every 1 million freaking years, as if the past 5 years before the blip weren't enough. They go to Amazon and find Drug, who is mind-controlling a community of people for who knows how long. When confronted about the Emergence and how planet Earth will be destroyed and killing everyone in the process, Drug initially doesn't care about that, which I think it also makes no sense. Of all the Eternals, he was the one who raised the most concerns about letting innocents die for the sake of not interfering as they were commanded to. So when given an opportunity to try to stop this Armageddon, which will culminate in all humans dying, for him to walk away simply makes no sense. This all goes against the Drug's motivation to protect innocents, regardless of how mad he is at them. So they are attacked by deviants. Thena has another breakdown, that thing of her memories she's struggling with in the middle of a fight, and Gilgamesh is killed by deviants, and I was surprised with how much I actually liked his character. So Cersei's powers somehow changed, and now she can turn a living thing into yet another living thing, I guess. I warned this will lead us somewhere. So both Phastos and Makari are found. They find our ship and start devising a plan to stop the emergence. But then we're taken to the last flashback, now about Ajak. It turns out that Ajak was actually killed by Ikarus. The two of them knew about the emergence, but Ajak had a change of heart and wanted to stop Arishem. Ikarus said he couldn't let that happen, so he pushed Ajak off a cliff. She's attacked by some deviants, and she's killed by the deviant who sucks the Eternal's abilities. After this flashback plot twist scene, Ikarus puts on his Eternal suit and starts attacking the other Eternals, and Sprite joins his cause and leaves with him. Now, as the other Eternals decide what to do, Kengo is iffy about whether or not they should stop the emergence, and there's just talk about if Earth is not destroyed with the emergence, then all life will die or something. Let's just process this dilemma for a second. Let's think about all the Avengers had done for all those years of MCU, which culminated in defeating Thanos, only for planet Earth to get destroyed not long after the snap being reversed. Imagine all that going to waste because Earth must die because otherwise new lives won't be formed in the universe, so yeah, the planet must be destroyed anyway. Let's also think about a character who's told to be a hero not joining their fight to save Earth because Earth is supposed to die so other lives can be created or something. What's a hero? Thank you, Marvel Phase 4, I hate it. So the big fight happens, Druk is thought to be killed by Ikarus, then Cersei is stabbed by Sprite, and I also think that she is going to die, but Cersei manages to stop the emergence. Also, in the meantime, the deviant who absorbs their abilities shows up again. He gets neglected most of the time throughout this 2.5-hour long movie, only for him to show up again at the final battle. I get why he was left aside most of the time so the movie could focus on the Eternals, especially when there are 10 of them, but still, for him to show up like for 5 minutes was pitiful. Also, the deviant was killed so quickly by Thena when he was actually shown to be very strong. He killed both Gilgamesh and Ajak, so for him to give Thena a tough fight only to be killed so quickly in the end looked pretty bad, and it felt more like, okay, we need to get rid of him so we can focus the rest of our final battle on Ikarus instead more than anything. Ikarus tries to kill Cersei, but he can't bring himself to do it, so he flies too close to the sun and poetically dies. Sprite turns into a human thanks to Cersei discovering this new side of her powers. So all is well, but the skies suddenly open up and she's standing before Arishem and she's going to be judged for killing a celestial to save mankind. And that's the end of the movie and our cue for our Eternals sequel. And Harry Styles is Thanos' brother now. So yeah, those were my thoughts about the Eternals. There was some good stuff in it. Makari and Gilgamesh were the Eternals I liked the most. Cersei and Drug were also alright. Although the acting of Drug and Cersei's actors was pretty meh every now and then, but I must give Drug credits for raising some reasonable concerns about being prevented from helping war victims for thousands of years, and his relationship with Makari seemed way better than Ikarus and Cersei's, to be honest. Some instrumental scores were really good, some shots looked great, however, the rest of the movie completely falls apart for me. The remaining 6 Eternals were very bland and meh. I don't think they were horribly written characters, but they were painfully average most of the time, and I completely failed to like them throughout the movie. Angelina Jolie was wasted as Thena, and Sprite was wasted as well. She talks about how she failed to relate to humanity the way Cersei could. She loves Ikarus and accepts to become a human in the end. But most of those things about her character were revealed or explored either when the movie was already halfway there or towards the ending. And we already had tons of information to process about the plot. We learned about the Emergence, how the Eternals came to be, the Celestials' roles in the universe, and Ikarus actually being the bad guy all along. So Sprite's struggles got neglected for a reasonable moment, only for it to be rushed up during the 3rd act. Ikarus actually had potential as a villain. He obeys what he was commanded to do until the end, regardless of the consequences. But for him to go through all that, pretending to be a good guy, secretly killing off Ajak, fighting against the other Eternals even if he has to kill them, only for him to stop because he remembered some flashbacks with Cersei quite similar to the end of The Last of Us Part 2 was pitiful. And also I think his romance with Cersei was really bad, so that made his change of heart even worse in the end. Their excuse on why they never interfered was pathetic, as I already talked about, and the movie kept contradicting that time and time again, while innocents were dying worse along the history of humanity, which makes it even harder for me to care about the Eternals and their story. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and if you like my content, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time around.